Good morning. Welcome back to Ribbon Candy Hooking. I'm Deanna. Today I have got some of my playthings out. I've got a bunch of hooks. Conversations happen a lot in the social media groups about what kind of hooks do I use? Am I having the right hook? Do I have it? Do I own it? Am I holding it in my hand? These are hard questions to answer. Let's look at some hooks together and see what we think about hooks. So I've got us down here today. And I've got a bunch of hooks that I've bought from online places. Let's look at some of the types, right? This is just a plain old vintage rug hook, the type that I use a lot with a flat shaft, right? This is a kind that I really like to use with all kinds of cuts. I don't have a different hook for all of the different cuts, right? I don't have a hook for 3s, a hook for 5s, a hook for 8s. No, thank you. I have one hook that I like holding in my hand and it works every time. It's this one or one like it. There's a lot of older hooks that work real well. A lot of these vintage type hooks, the Joan Moshimers, all of the sort of craft store brands that came up in the middle to late 20th century still work great. If it's a rug hook and it feels good in your hand and you're pulling your loops through, it's working. You've got the right hook. There are a lot of older hooks that we encounter, like this kind of hook that is, it looks like it's been adapted from a screwdriver, right? Vicious point on the top. It's really painful. If you kept putting this through your backing and it was even lightly touching you, you would end up with a really bloodied hand. But this is the kind of tool that people used back in the day when the tools were all handmade and homemade, and you got what you got and you didn't get upset. It has a nice deep crook, but a very, very sharp point. Things like this also made from silverware, right? Doesn't that look like a little knife or something like that? Not such a sharp, vicious point, not such a deep crook either, but I haven't tried this one yet. This one could work great. For me, the thing with this one is it has such a wide shank. It would be a lot of work every time pushing that through your backing. Even if you were using a very loose backing like burlap, that's just a lot of hook to have to push through thousands of times, right? But that is one of the nice vintage old styles. There's lots of older hooks that you will find that are handmade. This is one too. It's been kind of cobbled away at. This is glued in. The little shaft itself is glued in. Tiny, tiny hook for tiny little number 3 cut, little spaghetti angel hair type cut, or really thin sock yarn, lace yarn kind of a thing. Let's see, this is a Claire Murray. These are similar in style to the Joan Moshimers that came out in the 70s, 80s. These are great hooks. I stock the Joan Moshimers in 2 sizes. Very simple, and Claire Murray has all of her stuff for sale, again, through Nantucket Needleworks. A lot of these vintage hooks are still available and they still work great. This is a large head for what's called a primitive cut, but again, I use that for everything. This is kind of another screwdriver that's been turned into something else, just a big handle, very utilitarian, probably very useful, very dull head though, which makes one wonder how well is it going to poke through my backing thousands of times. These are all things that you need to try as you go. Some people prefer to work with what's called the Irish hook or the pencil hook, long skinny hook. These have potential, particularly when they're this beautiful, to be extraordinarily expensive, like 70s, 80s, dollars, right? Not seashells. Really expensive for a hook. It really depends on, does your hand like holding the pen style hook, whether you hold it underhand or overhand, doesn't matter to me, only matters to you and how it feels in your hand. If you like this style, if you like the way it feels, with this style, you don't have a kind of big bulb back that you can use as leverage to pull up on. You got this, right? So it really depends on what your style is. A lot of people who are crocheters prefer this style because they're used to holding a tool like this in their hand. It's very natural. It's like an extension of your hand. Just a different style hook. No special benefits, no magic to any of these hooks. Does it feel good in your hand? Another homemade one made from an old horn, I think, the antler horn kind of genre, very popular back in the day, beautiful handmade head on the hook, probably by the local, what's he called, the metalsmith guy, you know who I mean, the guy, the foundry guy who works with heat. My brain isn't working after a weekend of food poisoning. But these are a beautiful kind of novelty. They're very useful still. Really has to work for you, right? Because these are not quite as engineered as modern ones, but sometimes the old ones are beautiful and they work just as well as any modern one. Then we come to this category of hook, which is the bent hook. Now, people love these bent hooks who are beginning to experience problems with arthritis. So the bent hook, look at this funny bent hook. It looks like a piece of Bakelite or early plastic, something that someone made by hand. The funny thing about this one is that the hook is on my side. Normally the hook would be here, but the hook is actually here. So someone was holding it like this to pull through, which for me, this area here would start to burn pretty fast. It is going to depend on every person, isn't it? Hooking like this for somebody worked best. So it might have been in relation to the frame that they were on, but each one of these bent hooks is different. They are really helpful for arthritis wrists and hands, sometimes for carpal tunnel hands. Sometimes good just to switch off, but it's a very different movement going straight down and pulling up. It is something like a bike that you have to practice, ride on, get used to. And once you're used to it, you will not fall off, right? You will be fine. But the learning curve for some people is not worth it or not necessary if you're already having a great love relationship with your hook. This one has a tiny, teeny little head hook and a giant shaft. You want to think about these things when you're choosing your hooks because all hooks cost money, right? Unless you're getting some from a buddy, they all cost money. They all have different properties that make them more or less desirable for your purpose, right? This is another beauty with a really thick shaft again, but all of these are very different, quite different. You can see that, right? So this is what the world of hooks looks like. It is a moving target. Do not be confused by this tool. This is a proddy tool. We'll have a different conversation about proddy. Rug hooking is when you are pulling loops up through your backing like I am with my Lizzie Borden rug. I'm pulling loops up through my backing. Proddy is when you are pushing fabric down from the wrong side, like I did with this proddy project that I'm doing at the Green Mountain School this November. So completely different tool when you see this, and that's another video and a different conversation. Some of the other tools you see out there in the world that you don't want to be fooled by are these kinds of tools. Shoe hooks, right? Sometimes these can work in a latch hook backing, not a rug hooking backing, because shoe hooks come in all different sizes as well. Some people have success with these kinds of little things, little tools that are meant for buttoning shoes and for cracking nuts sometimes can work. It depends on your backing, but these will not work with rug hooking backing like monk's cloth, burlap, linen, and rug warp. These could only work with latch hook if you've got the right size. It's lovely to find them, and it's lovely to find backing that they work in, but those are not traditional rug hooking tools. This can be a traditional rug hooking tool. We will have another video on this. Look out for this. This is a latch hook that I have taped down the toggle with a piece of tape on, right? The toggle will play you because it will get in the way. I just tape it down with Scotch tape, and now I've got something that's a lot smaller than a shoe hook, but can work best in latch hook backing. I can rug hook into latch hook backing with a latch hook as long as I get rid of this toggle. So as you can see, there are lots of varieties of hooks. There are lots of ways that you can make your tool work. The question is, what tool feels right in your hand? If you are already holding a tool that feels good, feels warm, feels tactile, and is working, you don't need to shop for any more tools. But it is nice to know what you're looking at when you find particularly older ones, to know what the tool is, what's different about it, what might be the merits about it. Hopefully this video brought you some of that information. Every new hook is a new adventure and a new possibility, right? But I just want to remind you that you don't need 100 hooks to do rug hooking. You need one hook that you love. And if that hook is not working for your next project because you're working much wider, much thicker, much bigger, much heavier, much thinner, that's a different conversation. Then we look for smaller hooks or bigger hooks. But at this moment, if you already have the hook in your hand that you love, then you are united. Don't leave it at a hotel room or at a poolside or on the beach. Try to keep it in your hand or in a bag, because once it's gone, it's very hard to find another hook that you will fall in love with. Hooks are just like people. I will see you next time on Ribbon Candy Hooking.